Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the show today. I'm happy that you're with us. I'm Andre Lacey. We're having a great start to our morning so far. Today, we're talking about National Volunteer Week. Here in 2026, the week runs from April 19th through April 25th, and the week focuses on recognizing the vital contributions of volunteers and encouraging community service members to highlight the importance of the major push for service in the United States. And so joining me here today is Miss Tobi Johnson. She is an amazing person. I must tell you, I did my homework, lots of research on the perfect person to talk to, and you were that person. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to talk about volunteering. One of my favorite things.
Absolutely. You were the perfect person in my mindset because of all that you've done. I was surprised myself, and I had no idea that National Volunteer Week was a thing. So, can you break down for me what is National Volunteer Week for those who may not have heard about it?
So there's a couple different things. There's Global Volunteer Month, which is generally in April. And it's where around the world we're celebrating volunteerism and the contributions of time and talent of volunteers. National Volunteer Week, I believe, was first uh, established in the US by the Points of Light. And they also do a daily point of light, but it's really similar purpose to really just celebrate the work of all the folks around the US who are contributing their time, making a difference in their communities. And I believe that in Canada, it's the same week. Some other countries around the world, they have different months and different weeks of the year, but it's a very common occurrence to have some celebration of volunteers that, and again, there's usually a week long, and then there's our global volunteer celebration, which is this month. And then this year in 2026 is actually a really interesting year because it's also the global UN Year of the Volunteer. So, United Nations um, decided that, or by proclamation, uh, stated that, or created the year, or proclaimed the UN 2026 Year of the Volunteers. So we have a lot to celebrate this month.
Absolutely. See, this is very, very important to me because again, I had no idea that this was a an opportunity to celebrate volunteers. You hear stories about people that volunteer, but dedicating a whole month or holiday to it is something that I'm sure many people don't know about. So I appreciate you really giving us the points about what this month really means and why it's so important. So can you share a moment in your own life where volunteer work may have truly affected someone's life?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually want to share I'd love to share the story of a gentleman that I worked with. So I help nonprofit organizations, I've worked in nonprofits my whole career. And about 15 years ago, I started my own consulting practice where I started helping nonprofit organizations improve their volunteer engagement and mobilize more volunteers. And I was working with a statewide program that was actually a state government program that had volunteers working in different communities throughout the state that were helping Medicare beneficiaries navigate the complexities of Medicare. And who better to help a Medicare beneficiary than somebody else who's been through the complexities of that program? Because it's super complicated, and most people, when they join Medicare, have no idea the decisions they're making and what might impact them long term. So I was working with this organization and their volunteers and their partner organizations throughout the state to really bring more volunteers on board and really help the community navigate this complex healthcare program. And I started working with an advisory group of volunteers. I always like to work with volunteers to help guide our consulting project. And there was a gentleman in the group who was getting an award that during that time for Volunteer of the Year. And I probably was in April, and it was probably for National Volunteer Week. Uh, and, I was talking with him about his journey as a volunteer, and I asked him, when did you start volunteering? And he said, "Well, I started volunteering after my wife passed away." And I said, "Oh, really? What happened?" And apparently, after his wife had passed away, he had become very depressed and had really almost become homebound. He's a retired gentleman. And his son said to him, like, "Look, Dad, there's a senior center down the street. You really need to get out and do something. You can't stay at home all the time. You need to have friends. You need to get out of this funk. And, I know it's really painful, but you've got to process your grief. And I think volunteering might help you process your grief." And so he started volunteering at the senior center, and start learn and then joined this program and went through their extensive training and started helping out. And a few years later, here he is, Volunteer of the Year. And so it was a life transforming moment for him in terms of overcoming this grief of losing his wife and then finding new purpose and meaning in this new phase, right? Obviously, he also made an impact on his fellow volunteers and the organization he was supporting, because he wouldn't have been voted as, Volunteer of the Year. And I knew him to be a very amazing, thoughtful participant in our advisory group. So he also impacted my life as a consultant. So, we can be in our darkest times and come through them in community with other people. And I think his story really um, elucidates that transformative nature of volunteerism, and how it can transform, not only the people you're serving, but yourself, and then other people you come into contact with. There is true power in community.
Absolutely. And see, but because I'm a journalist, we
Uh-huh.
often say that you never really know someone's story until you sit down and really listen to what they have to say. And you telling this story is why I chose, despite not knowing really about what this was supposed to be, why
Yeah.
I decided to book this, because that's important. You never really know how you can make an impact in someone's life. And you clearly did just that.
Yeah. I mean, when I started volunteering, my first volunteer experience, back in the day when I volunteered, there was not the type of service learning and the type of volunteering. There was volunteering going on with, like, brownies and Boy Scouts and that kind of thing. But in general, schools didn't have service learning opportunities. So when I was coming up, the only way I was learning how to be a helper in a community was through my family. And my grandmother had like 10 kids, 10 some, great grandkids, 14 some great grand. She had so many, we had a huge family. And we didn't do volunteering formally, but we learned through my grandmother's, she was not a woman of means. And so we learned from her about helping our neighbors. And, they had a huge family. They lived, they were, at a low, they had really low income, and they would bring people in. I remember they adopted a young person that would come and live with them. They'd have the neighbors down the street, all the kids in the community would come to the house and eat. She would feed everybody. And they didn't have a lot of money. So we learned about this kind of sort of community philanthropy or community helping through our just the culture of our family. Fast forward to me getting ready to go to graduate school. I really needed to get experience working in the community. I was going to graduate school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, studying art history, and I was going to work in nonprofit arts. So I needed to start getting some good experience on the ground level. And so I started volunteering, unpaid intern at with the Seattle Arts Commission when I lived in Seattle. And they had a community arts gallery where they were building a bus tunnel, and they were putting in public art. And so the art gallery was showing the mock-ups of the public art. And so I would help people understand, here's what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. I dedicated my summer to this. I made no money, and I had no money. And so I was riding my bike to and from every day. I was saving my, pennies so I could buy a hot dog just to have for lunch. And that's what I did for the summer before I went to graduate school. And then now I had real world experience, and that's how my volunteering started, aside from like helping friends and neighbors, helping family that I learned through my family. So everybody has a reason they volunteer. We think it's completely 100% altruistic. And altruism always has like something we're getting out of it, whether it's, like that gentleman I said, he volunteers tiered because he needed to, find a new phase in his life and overcome his grief. I was raised volunteering and helping informally in community and helping in our family. And then I volunteered because I wanted to get real world experience. So, whatever our reason for volunteering, there's so much we can get out of it, both giving and getting. And there's nothing wrong with getting from our volunteering. If we're not gaining something from it, whether it's a feel good reason to volunteer, that we want to feel good about the work we're doing in the community, we want to make a difference. Maybe there's something very specific we want to make a difference around. We're always gaining. Everybody's gaining. It's a win-win-win-win.
Enjoying the show so far? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Alive Podcast Network for just $9.99. The QR code is right here. Now, back to the show. Absolutely. And I think one of the most common misconceptions, at least from what I've seen, is that when you volunteer, some people feel that they either don't have the time to do it or that they're wasting their time. And I've
Uh-huh.
explained to people myself, it's like it's very rewarding, at least from my
Yes.
own experience. It's very rewarding because whether you gain something from it or not, which the hope is that you do, at the end of it, I feel pretty good, to have done something to help someone because you never
Yes.
really know what someone else could be going through in their own life behind the scenes.
Yeah, volunteering is really much more impactful than we really realize. I brought some stats today that I thought I'd share. One is that unpaid volunteers make up approximately 1/3 of the nonprofit workforce. That's not even including some of the public sector organizations that also engage volunteers. So this is an almost invisible workforce. Not that they're not of value. Of course, volunteers I totally believe in volunteerism. But I think as we walk through our lives, we don't realize how many volunteers are out there helping. I travel a lot for my job. And so I see volunteers at airports. I'll go up to people, and go, "Are you a volunteer?" And it's like, "Yeah, I am." All volunteers are running all of our sports teams for our kids. Volunteers are tutoring. Volunteers are in almost every hospital. Volunteers are sometimes in our community policing programs or community engagement programs. Volunteers are, you name it. Volunteers are in our food banks. Volunteers are like everywhere, and we don't even really realize it, sometimes. But 1/3 of all of the new US nonprofit workforce is volunteers. So our safety net as a society could not exist if we didn't have communities, folks in communities stepping up. Um, so right now, about 28% of every of the US population volunteers, of the adult population. That's not even including kids in school volunteering. Um, 43% of all nonprofits are entirely volunteer run. That means they have no paid staff at all. 43%. Like most nonprofits, I would say 80% or so are very small, and they're formed to solve a specific community problem, and it's people coming together to make it happen. If you think about any kind of important movement, or change that has happened. You think of the women's movement, you think of the civil rights movement, you think of just the way, us working a 40-hour work week instead of an 80-hour work week. All of these things happened because people in a community came together and said, this thing has to change and we're going to become part of making that change happen. So many of our nonprofits that are very established today started as volunteers. So, it is a network of people that are making a difference. So if you think that you don't have time, think about how much time you could give. Maybe it's only a couple hours a month, but that couple hours a month could be a major change for that organization to have, let's say 10 people said they'd give 2 hours a month. All of a sudden you have 20 hours a month of meaningful work. Now, the other thing I would say is folks should choose judiciously. Choose a cause that really means something to you, that feeds your soul. Don't just volunteer to volunteer. Choose an organization that you think is a good alignment with what you want to achieve in the world and the folks you want to help.
Absolutely. And I can just say from my own personal experience, I actually remember growing up and I went to a religious private school where they would have us do community service hours. And I must
Mm-hmm.
admit, when I started doing them, I really didn't understand what the purpose was. I believe I was in middle school when we started, and it went all the way through high school. And I can say now that I've actually experienced that, I understand the importance of volunteerism and I'm more appreciative of it and understand the means of how it can really help people. And you never really know what someone's going through. And in that moment, that one act of kindness and volunteerism can really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, we are live in a very divided world. I think that that's up for debate right
Oh
now.
yeah.
But you would be very surprised at the kinds of people who may vote differently, may have some core values that differ. But when they're volunteering shoulder to shoulder and they're working together, like let's say they're like, helping a kid, helping a kid who has a terminal illness, and a team is coming together to help grant that kid a wish. Those folks that are doing that together are focused on that kid. They're not focused on how they vote. They're not focused on the values that divide them. They're focused on the values that bring them together. And so, in some ways, volunteerism is a great divide a bridge builder because we can be around people that we wouldn't normally be around in our regular lives, in our day-to-day lives. So there's like coming in contact with people who are different than us. Also the people we serve. If we are working in a community and we're coming across people who are in need, let's say we're distributing food in a food bank, we may have never stepped foot in a food bank before. I myself went to a food bank when I was in college because I had no money and I was working two jobs and I was trying to make a living and pay for school, but there were times where I had to use a food bank. And so folks come in contact and they can start to see what people in need are struggling with. And that people in need are often people like them, that they're not that different. And so there's that piece of, and I think it gives us more compassion to see where people are struggling. And so when those policy issues come up, or when we can have an opportunity to advocate for change in the laws or change in the resources or change, we are more informed because we're out in the community and we can see where that need lies. So there's a lot more happening than just giving a pair of hands, although that's a big deal.
Absolutely. I'm curious, in your point of view, what are some of the most overlooked needs in communities right now?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the community. I would say that what I'm hearing from the clients I work with the nonprofits that I work with, that what they are seeing trend wise is a move towards more what we call episodic volunteering, more flexible volunteering roles where people can kind of come and go in their volunteering in a way that works best with their lives. And while organizations are really wanting to, respond to that and offer opportunities like that, and the field of nonprofits, we're working very hard on trying to figure out how to make volunteering more flexible. By the same token, some of the needs that they have are for sort of more what we call formal volunteering roles where the volunteer comes on a regular basis to help out. So, for example, mentoring. It's not going to work for a young person to have a different mentor every week. They need to form a relationship with a caring adult who's there for them and committed to them over whatever period of time, if it's 6 months, a year, however long it is. And so those are the types of roles that organizations are really looking towards. Doesn't mean people are volunteering 20 hours a week, but they are looking for people who can commit on a regular basis, 1, 2, 3, 4 times a month on a regular basis for a period of that has a beginning, middle, and an end. So, for example, another group I've worked with, they do tax preparation and they need volunteers to actually learn how to do tax preparation, which they have software and offer training to work on a regular basis, hopefully weekly, once a week throughout the tax prep season. And then once, April, May runs around, the volunteering, they're done with their volunteering and then they can come back next year. So there's different ways these committed, more formal volunteering roles work. It's not always you're going to commit to the entire year. But those are the roles that people are really struggling to fill because we're all so busy, right? But I feel like when people say they don't have enough time, I often think that it's maybe that's not the real reason. Maybe there's another reason. Maybe they don't feel like they have the confidence. Maybe they don't understand that there are different ways of volunteering. Like my volunteering right now, I volunteer for Master Gardeners, and we do a Facebook Live during the we used to do it every week. Now we do it every other Saturday during the growing season. And we go live and we answer questions and we do presentations and we talk about what's happening in our gardens. Well, it's all done online. So I commit to doing this throughout the growing season on every Saturday morning. I get every other Saturday morning now. I get up in the morning and we jump online. Sometimes if I'm traveling, somebody else jumps online instead of me, but we're a team. But it requires me to be committed to this. It's not like I just kind of come and go whenever I want. So, but that makes it flexible for me because I can do it from my home. So I can get up in the morning, come downstairs, get in my office, and jump online and start talking gardening. So there are ways to be flexible. But again, what organizations are looking for, rather than one-off volunteers, which are helpful for events and those kinds of things, what they're really looking for is more people to commit for a period of time.
Join the conversation. Have a story idea, topic, or guest you want featured on Andre the Podcast? Send us a message. We look forward to hearing from you. Absolutely. And that kind of leads me to my follow-up question, which might actually be helpful to people who are listening right now. So for someone who's searching for purpose, for example, how can service, in your opinion, be a starting point?
Absolutely. I think it's important to, there's a lot of reasons why we want to give. I'm actually writing a book right now for volunteers who lead. So I've been thinking a lot about, leadership from the inside out. What happens inside that makes you a better volunteer leader outside. And so it's always good to start with yourself because your commitment to volunteerism is going to be so much stronger if you understand your big why volunteering matters to you. So if you're thinking about your own purpose, it helps to think about what kind of lights you up. What do you most care about? What would you take a stand for? And I'm not talking about necessarily grassroots community, activism and those kinds of things, although I've done that kind of volunteering as well. But do you care most about? Sometimes it's about something, an area of your life where you want to give back. Maybe someone helped you in the past and you want to pay it forward. That might be a reason for your purpose. Your purpose on the, whatever your purpose on the planet. It might be a special skill you have, something that makes you, you really enjoy, that people tell you you're good at, like, oh, you're such a good people person. It may be an injustice that you've seen that you just want to make right. Now, it doesn't mean that volunteering is going to save everything and change the world completely 100%. But you can start being a person in that area, making a difference in that area, adding your shoulder to the wheel. It takes a lot of people to make change happen, not just one person. Sometimes it looks like it's one person, but it's not. It's thousands of people working together. The other area might be like, just you care about your community, you care about your local neighborhood, you care about your kid's school, you care about your town, your hometown. There's lots of volunteer opportunities around that, like beautification and or school-based volunteering, all of that. So you have to kind of you don't have to, but I recommend you take a look at what you really care about, what lights you up, because those are the types of opportunities that you're going to stick with, and that you're going to be able to make a commitment to over the long term. Because the more you volunteer with an organization, the better you're going to get at understanding their needs, and the more skills you're going to develop as well as a volunteer, and the more skills in making a difference. And so we're better off staying with an organization if we and get finding the right organization for us. And some people volunteer for more than one organization as well. Lots of people do that. So you can work with one organization or more than one.
Absolutely. And see, I think people in a lot of cases they feel that they aren't with one organization, or if they don't commit to one specific organization, for example, to volunteer, that they aren't doing anything. Whereas there are many people right now, as we're speaking, who are involved in multiple community volunteerism events or organizations. And so that flexibility, as you said earlier, can really help someone who might feel, okay, I don't have the time, but just volunteering, let's say 30 minutes to an hour a day, if nothing else, can
Yeah.
really leave an impact on someone in some way.
Yeah, and even once a month. Like, you could help distribute food in a food bank once a month. Now, you can't tell me you don't have time for that. One day, yeah, like half a day a month. Come on, you can do that. Now there are people who legitimately don't have time to volunteer, and I absolutely, understand that. Folks who are taking care of sick elders, single moms who are shuttling their kids around and working two jobs and trying to make ends meet. People who are moving and have a lot, or people who own a business and are working like 60 hours a week to keep their business afloat. Those things are real pressures on people's lives. But there's also times, if you think about it, people are hanging out binging Netflix. I say, hey, we could do something besides binge Netflix on this weekend, couldn't we? So, and if you don't have time, is there something you can do in your neighborhood? Is there something you can do? We live in a cul-de-sac. I live in East Tennessee right now, and we live in a cul-de-sac. We're getting ready to move back west, but we've lived in this cul-de-sac for 16 years. My husband for 20 years. And there are things we do with our neighbors, like bring in their garbage for them. If they're on vacation, take their mail. If we have a storm, sometimes our neighbor will come over to our house. There's things we do just to help one another. So there's informal helping that you can do anytime, to be helpful to your neighbors or folks. If you're strapped for time, try to do of service, like, if you have kids, do family volunteering. Volunteer for your kids' sports teams or your kids' school. Those kinds of things. If you're strapped for time, look at remote volunteering. Is there online volunteering you can do? There's all kinds of. There's a crisis line that's 100% all online. Is and all the volunteers are doing it online. So you can also peruse your local volunteer center's website, or idealist.org has volunteer listings, and you can peruse and see like what are the time commitments here, and see like what matches my ability to help. And again, you're like, I'm pretty sure there's some time you could, carve out of your Netflix binge to volunteer instead of watching Netflix. Get up off that couch, right?
Absolutely. And that leads me to my last question before we run out of time here. And yeah, I think you kind of already started, but if you could challenge everyone listening right now to take one action during National Volunteer Week or just in general, what would that one challenge be?
I would say, you know, I would just say, I'm going to say take a baby step. And here's a baby step. Like, obviously, helping your neighbors out, all that's something you can do. But why not check out, just go online, poke around, look at volunteer opportunities near me, take a look at what's listed in Google, poke around in your local volunteer center's website, poke around on Idealist, and see if there's anything that appeals to you. And then reach out and see if, is there a way, do some research. This is my challenge to folks. Do some research. And if something appeals to you, if there's something that's going to match what you're looking for, go ahead and apply or go ahead and sign up and give it a go. You know, I think sometimes, we came out of this pandemic. It was very, my husband says we were all feral. Like we stopped figuring out how to be social with one another. And I can remember how nervous everybody was to get back together in person. I remember I was going to big events and I was like, oh, this is really stressful. I don't know. Like human beings like have social anxiety. Do not let that get in the way. Because remember that, and I think we're still feeling a little bit. I mean, we're not like right post-pandemic level right now. I think people have figured out how to be in community with one another. But do not let the fact that you're going to be joining a bunch of strangers stop you, because they will not be strangers for very long. Because everybody that's volunteering beside you and the staff that are working at that nonprofit, if they have paid staff, they are in it to win it just like you are, and they care about the same things you do. And even if they don't look like you, just give it a go. I mean, I when I started volunteering for Master Gardener, I walked into my first training and most of the people were retired. And I'm here, this busy entrepreneur taking time out of my day. And I'm thinking, one of these things does not look like the other. And that person is me. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get along with this group. They're not even, they're in a different life stage than me. Well, the minute we had our first break, we started talking about composting and organic gardening. And within 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, these are so my people, right? So don't be afraid that you're not going to find your people. If it's a cause you care about, they care about it as much as you do, and you're going to find a common language. So don't be afraid. So first get out there and poke around, see what's in your community. And if something appeals to you, step forward and make it happen. I can guarantee you that these nonprofits, if they are advertising for volunteers, they need your help. They can't do it on their own. They don't have the budget to do it on their own. And sometimes services suffer when we don't have people volunteering. I've heard of organizations closing down programs because they just simply don't have the workforce to make it happen. And we don't want that happening, because then our communities suffer. So community doesn't happen by magic. It happens by people working together. And by the way, it's a lot of fun. So, and sometimes it's funner than watching Netflix.
Absolutely. Get out there and volunteer. You never really know who you might befriend or how you could help someone else in your own community. Ms. Tobi Johnson, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. When that book comes out, please feel free to let me know. I'd love to have you back on the show.
Oh, I'd love to join you. I want more people to not only volunteer, but to build the confidence to lead other volunteers. That's really where we're at because, our boards, our committees, our event staff, all those folks that help people out. First of all, I just want to say thank you to all those folks who volunteer, both the leaders and the followers. You all that are volunteering are making a huge difference in your community. You know that already. You got the good vibes from that. And for those of you who haven't gotten in on the fun yet, you have time. You can volunteer 2 hours a month. You can find the time. Do it. It's fun. It also really makes your life a better life. I just think it does. So
Absolutely. You heard it here first. Thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
thanks, Andre. And thanks to
You're so
everybody
welcome.
listening and watching.
Absolutely. Go out there and do something good today. And again, thank you for being with us. Be encouraged.